okay with you.
Brian, can you just confirm that the live stream is running before we get started?
Good morning.
Hi, Danuta.
Okay, Madam Chair, we're now live. Please go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Brittany. I'll call the meeting to order, the Climate Action Committee on November 5th, 2021 at 11:02. Welcome back, everybody. Good to see your familiar faces, and I imagine Anne will be joining us shortly. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, perfect. So I will begin with our land acknowledgement statement, if I may. We acknowledge with respect the history, spirituality, and culture of the Anishinaabeg, the people of the Three Fires known as Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi Nation, who have inhabited this land from time immemorial, and further give thanks to the Chippewas of Saugeen and the Chippewas of Nawash, now known as the Saugeen Ojibwe Nation, as the traditional keepers of this land. We also recognize the Métis and Inuit whose ancestors shared this land and these waters. May we all as treaty people live with respect on this land and live in peace and friendship with all its diverse peoples. So I will ask that we have someone move to approve the agenda. And then we can talk about whether there are any additions. Luke, I think I saw your hand up. That could be Anne there.
That would be Anne, yes. So are other people having trouble?
No, but I have off and on for the last week. So yeah, it's an ongoing.
I did for the last remuneration committee meeting, and I think Luke did then as well, have trouble getting in.
Gotcha. You're okay then? Are you joining us are you on video, or is it best to keep the video off, or you're on by phone? Thanks, Brittany.
I'm by phone, I can't get in.
Shoot. Okay, well, we are here and we are hearing you loud and clear, Anne, so thanks. We have just called the meeting to order and I've read the land acknowledgement statement. So we are just talking about the agenda, and Luke has made the motion that we approve the agenda. Are there any additions to the agenda as it stands currently? Seeing none. All in favor of the approval of the agenda? And that carries. Thank you. The usual declaration of pecuniary interest. If there are any interests to declare now, please do so, or at any time throughout the remainder of the meeting. So moving on to item number 5, approval of the minutes of the previous meeting of October 13th, 2021. And I just need a mover that the minutes of those meetings of the Climate Action Committee be approved. Thank you, Luke. And is there any discussion about those minutes? Any points of clarification or revisions? Brittany?
Thank you. I don't have a revision per se. I just wanted to note procedurally that Vice Chair Schneider, if you would like to indicate your vote either opposed or for, or if you would like to move or second a motion, please just verbally do so and we'll note so for the record.
Will do, thank you. And I was for that.
Thank you, and thanks, Brittany, for that reminder. Keeping us on track for all things procedure. We appreciate that. Luke, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's about the minutes. Just for clarification, it was about the. Sorry, I'm looking for the schedule for the working group, and there was a commitment made in point 11.1, the internal working plan, that staff would come up with a work plan with more detail. And I wondered if we at the time if we put a time frame to that, because I thought that we discussed that we would discuss that possibly during this meeting. So just I don't recall. I have something in my own notes, but I don't know if it formally was agreed as in the meeting.
I wonder if it's appropriate, perhaps maybe we could add that under the staff reports. Would that be a time where that might be discussed as it falls within the current agenda? Does that make sense, Brittany? And is Steve with us today as well, or he is? Okay. Why don't I see Steve? Oh, ask and you shall receive. I saw you earlier, Steve. Thank you. All right, so is it okay, Luke, if we come back to that point about the internal work plan under the staff, the operational update, I think. Okay, perfect. So all in favor of approval of those minutes of October 13th?
Yes.
Thank you, and that carries. So presentations, we have our senior planner. Oh yes, I see Jen's here today as well. So perfect. The official plan review, a verbal presentation from Jen, our senior planner, Jen Burnett. Hi, Jen.
Hi, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm happy to provide an update on the status of the official plan update. So on September 15th, JL Richards consultants presented to council the scope of the review of the official plan. So this is not a major overhaul of the official plan, it's just an update. It comes about simply because there's a number of parts of the official plan that do not comply with current legislation. So for example, there are references to the 2005 PPS, and the current, the PPS right now was actually updated in 2020, as well as the county official plan has been updated, as well as the Niagara Escarpment plan. So we're going to be bringing our official plan into conformity with those governing documents. As part of the update, we're also looking at including policy for housing, source water protection, servicing requirements, parkland, and recognizing our Indigenous peoples, as well as climate change. So if you look in if you search the current official plan, there is no mention of climate change in there. There are policies contained in our official plan that speak to natural heritage features, natural hazard features, and protecting them. And we also, Georgian Bluffs also falls under the County of Grey official plan and the Niagara Escarpment plan. So within those documents, there are provisions related to the protection of natural hazard and heritage features, and the county official plan does speak to climate change. So it's not that we're without any sort of governing policies, it's just that the township's plan needs to be updated. So one of the things that in discussing this update with the consultants, they recognize the importance of addressing climate change. They are aware that this group exists and that the township is serious about moving forward with changing the way that we approach the future effectively. So what we're planning to do is hold a 3-hour workshop. Part of that workshop will look at housing, and part of that workshop will look at climate change. So this is something that's we're hoping to schedule for the beginning of December. And what I need from this group is a list of stakeholders. So recognizing that you're all very well connected and informed on this, I would appreciate if someone from this group could provide me with a list of stakeholders so that I can provide those to the consultants, and that we can get as many groups involved so that we can actually have some meaningful consultation on this. And then I'd be happy to answer any questions anyone has. about the update. Oh, in the chat, I have just added a link to the September 15th meeting where the consultants presented the update to council. So if anyone here is interested in just learning more about the entire schedule and scope of the update, then that document, or sorry, that YouTube video is available. The link there is in the chat for you.
Great. Thank you, Jen. And questions, Danuta?
I was just saying, going to volunteer on behalf of the 5 of us who are citizen members of the group to collate a list of stakeholders if you want us to do that. And I could be the one to send it in if the rest of you would like to feed in to me suggestions for that list.
That is super. Thank you very much, Danuta. That makes perfect sense. Jen, do you have a deadline to receive that list? You said the early December for the 3-hour workshop. So are we talking about sometime within the next week or two?
Yes, please, preferably by Wednesday.
I'm sure that list probably already exists somewhere anyway. It's just a matter of eyeballing it and accessing it and maybe updating it. So thank you, Danuta, and that's appreciated. Any other questions for Jen while we have her here? Luke?
Jen, thanks for the update and great to hear there's this inclusion of climate change. Is there anything you expect from this group? Is there anything that we can provide in terms of, and I don't know how these workshops go and how what the process is like, but in terms of what questions to ask, what does climate change mean from an official plan perspective, and what is within the boundaries and what's outside of the boundaries? Is there anything that we can do to support you?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think, Jen, maybe if you could also refer to the consultants, like the public input opportunities might be an opportunity there as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So we basically need participation, and we need people to come forward and participate in the workshop and share their knowledge. I understand that from procedurally, it may not be possible, and I'm going to defer to the clerk to confirm that everyone from this group participate in the workshop, because it may represent an actual meeting. So, but if there could be some people appointed or volunteer to participate in the workshop, but also I understand that you all have networks and other groups that you may belong to, and we really would appreciate that knowledge, those knowledgeable people coming forward and participate to better inform the official plan policy. So it's going to be a policy. It's not actually going to be a plan. I believe that that's something that Trevor and Steve are working on. So, but this is going to be policy to inform development in the township, as well as to kind of give not permission to those subsequent plans, but just to enable them as well. So.
Okay, so that sounds good. So the workshop, Jen, just so I'm clear, is that it's like who all would be invited to that? Is that council and staff and potentially some members from this group, or who does that include?
It would be a stakeholders, so there could be members of council attending. But again, if all of council attends, then I believe it constitutes a meeting. So it would be people to volunteer. So we'd like to have a variety of different stakeholders, and we could take a list of people, and I would provide that to the consultants, and then we could send out the invitations. So. I realize that that many of you are on different committees and dedicate your time to the different committees you may be on. So if, you know, there's someone else on in the groups that you're a part of who may want to come forward. I appreciate the effort that everybody puts forward, and I don't want to put pressure on you to spread yourselves too thin. So we would, if you want to be involved, definitely put your name down on that stakeholder list, and then we can send out the invitation.
You know, I think that's an excellent point, because there is a very well-established network within Georgian Bluffs beyond the faces you see here. And so that could be a discussion to be had back at some of those tables. Danuta.
Sorry, just unmuted myself. Regarding moving not away from climate action, but or climate change, but the update of the official plan review, are there any policies I have that I can't recall? I haven't maybe read the whole thing regarding tree bylaws or tree policies for replacing trees that are removed for various reasons. Is that something that is in the update?
Through the chair, that is something that can be brought up during the workshop and identified as something that needs to be addressed. There are different avenues to address tree retention and enhancement in the township. So, for example, there is I believe there is a, sorry, what's that covered? It's a vegetative cover requirement that is throughout. I know it's throughout the Grey Bruce County, and there's the forestry bylaw, the tree cutting bylaw at the county that regulates tree removal. The Conservation Authority also has, through their Ontario Regulation 15106, they have provisions in place to protect land in and around the streams and water courses and restrict tree removal. There's also Georgian Bluffs is comprised of a large, as you know, a large area of wetland and significant woodland. There are policies at the provincial level as well as at the county level that protect the removal of those trees. In terms specifically of, for example, the development in a settlement area, what we can do is, and as part of the planning work plan, is we're looking towards having a subdivision document which looks at when a developer comes in, what sort of remediation would be required in an area. So we understand that they need to remove some trees and generally to build the homes, but what sort of remediation efforts would be required as part of the subdivision agreement. So we'll be looking at a subdivision document so that that we can have enhanced development throughout the township. There's also, when a subdivision is approved within the settlement areas, there's always a requirement for the applicable studies, and generally in Georgian Bluffs, because of the tree cover that we have, it usually involves an environmental impact study. So with those studies, there's always a recommendation for tree retention. So for example, we see that up at Francis Lake. In 2015, there was development approved up at Francis Lake, and each of the lots, the 18 lots in there, all have a tree retention requirement. And then there's a no development buffer to that area of protected trees. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah, thank you. That's a lot of information. And I think for me, it points out that, you know, sometimes we say, well, it's, you know, these bylaws and these policies are covered by the county official plan with which we have to adhere, and the Ontario regulations But I really feel that if we don't have municipal specific policy statements and bylaws, that sometimes those others overarching policies and plans go by the wayside or get forgotten or left out. So I hope we can encourage things like tree cutting policies to come forward, and we're seeing that in neighboring communities as well. I think it is an important strategy in tackling with the nature-based solutions to climate change. So over to you,
Could I
John.
ask a question when you're?
Oh, sorry, I didn't. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and you can all. Yeah, we'll go to John and then to you, Anne.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question for Jen. Do we have an existing data source of the degree to which we are spatially covered with trees and wetlands? And I'm thinking in the context of a GIS-based database where we would be able to assess not just the amounts, but spatially where these areas are within that framework.
I don't know that we have something that's readily available. I'd have to go back and have a look at one of the documents that I've seen from the county on the number of hectares of trees we have, but it's not a there's definitely processes like through remote sensing or GIS that would allow us to assess the vegetative cover throughout the township, and we can do that, over time. So, for example, we have air photos from 2006, 2010, 2015, and now 2020. So we could get an analysis of the vegetation cover change over time. But in terms of the actual number of hectares of tree cover that we actually have, I could reach out to the county and see if they have something available for us, because I'm pretty sure that along with their forest management plans and their tree cover bylaw, they would have that information.
Oh, just then a quick follow-up to that. I assume that you use the same classification criteria as the county in terms of their land use mapping and planning?
So the county makes GIS information available to us. So because we don't have anyone in the planning department that to do any sort of GIS mapping, we actually have an agreement with the county to provide those mapping services to us. So we are using their information and their terminology as well.
Okay, the one final thing, I've actually been working with the county off and on over the last almost a year now. So perhaps rather than take up any more of this meeting time, would I be able to communicate directly with you, Jen, in terms of moving this issue forward? Because it's something that, in fact, I just met with Linda Swanson yesterday about this, and it's an ongoing project I am working with the county. So would I be able to connect with you directly for specific questions?
Just through the chair, if that's fine with the committee. I myself have would be open to that, but I'd just defer to the committee for direction.
I see heads nodding. I think I'm not hearing any opposition, and thank you for making yourself available, Jen. I know how incredibly busy you are. And John, that's exciting to hear you're working with the county on that. I would say in a similar vein, speaking for our agricultural community a little bit, drawing from my own roots as having grown up on a small family farm, I wonder too about mapping for agricultural lands and types of lands. It's hard to know. I don't know, Jen, maybe you can enlighten me, but I would think it's kind of hard to know what lands are prime farmlands compared to other designations and how we protect those from development. without having, again, some proper analysis and mapping and data. And I imagine all of that gets pretty expensive, but it's sort of along the same lines as the tree cover that John's referring to. I don't know if you have any comments about the agricultural piece.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because the province contains policies that don't allow for development in the rural and the agricultural areas. So first of all, the rural and ag areas are defined by a soil classification, and that was done by the province. So if there's an opportunity where if a property owner disputes their soil classification, they can hire an expert to go out and provide an analysis of that soil and change that classification. So in the province, the you may have heard me say on different occasions that settlement areas are where the province directs growth and development. So right now we have defined settlement area boundaries. They're recognized in the Georgian Bluffs official plan as well as in the Grey County official plan. So development is not permitted outside of those areas. And if we want to do that, which is something that we will be looking at in the next year or so, we have the opportunity to expand settlement area boundaries subject to a comprehensive municipal review. So what that means is that there are a series of studies that you would have to do, and you would have to have a justification in order for the province to consider adding additional settlement area lands to your existing settlement areas. So you can't just all of a sudden as a municipality decide that you're going to, for example, expand the East Linton settlement area to include the lands to the west. You actually have to go through a prescribed process and provide a justification for that, and demonstrate why there's no other developable lands available and why you would be taking in those agricultural and rural lands. So there at times people view the provincial policies that way as frustrating, but they're there to protect our agricultural and rural lands and just to make sure that we're concentrating development within our settlement areas, which is where we're supposed to have our servicing, we're supposed to have our residential development as well as our industrial and commercial development.
Okay, thank you. And John, are you good to go with that before I turn the floor over to Anne?
Yeah, and Madam Chair, and I guess my only request or I can include everyone in the email loop if you like in terms of inclusion, but some of these tend to be rather technical questions, so I'm not sure that everyone wants to know that. So it's your decision.
Okay, may I suggest to the committee that you bring back reports when the timing seems appropriate, John, when you have collected some data? Would that make sense rather than sending circulating those emails? I personally get a lot of emails. I just as soon have the Coles Notes version and the summary from you, but that's just my own opinion. How do other folks feel? Yeah. Does that make sense then, John? Is that okay?
Absolutely, Madam Chair, because these processes tend to take time. I originally started this work about a year ago when Hiba was at the county, and when she left, it got derailed, but I've now picked it up again. So it does take time.
Super. Thank you. And over to you, Anne.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I've got a couple of questions. First, with regard to the stakeholders, are we talking about stakeholders that either work or reside in Georgian Bluffs?
Jen?
I would say that as long as we get a good representation of Georgian Bluffs residents, we could also benefit from the knowledge and experience of others in the area. So we all know that a lot of what happens in Bruce and Grey County, it's a regional initiative. So I think that we need to pay attention to the experience and the knowledge of people outside of Georgian Bluffs, because they have the opportunity of having seen what's going on in different parts of this region. And I think those considerations are important to bring to the table as well.
Okay, thank you. So my next question, and Jen, I wonder whether there are any samples of completed official plans that have done a really good job of including climate change within the plan that we could take a look at.
My understanding was that the county's plan was has a good example, and I'm not sure of other municipalities that have recently updated their official plans. I know that there are a number of municipalities that are working towards the update, but I could find out, and I will provide that information to the chair.
All right, thank you. So my last question, I'm going back to the conversation around trees and tree covers, and you listed a whole lot of kind of bylaws and guidelines and things related to that. What I wonder about is, how does the official plan address the actual enforcement of those bylaws, as well as dealing with violations of those bylaws? Is that kind of part of an official plan, or does that fit somewhere else?
So thank you, Chair. So the purpose of an official plan is to provide overarching policies, and where you get into the implementation of that policy is through tools like a zoning, or through bylaws, so, and procedures. So when you would go, the official plan would provide an opportunity for you to enable a policy, and then from that you would create bylaws and procedures to implement the policy in the plan. So you don't get into implementation or procedures in an official plan, because it's more of a guiding document. And with our official plan, it only applies to settlement areas. And so with the development in a settlement area, it's generally governed by a subdivision agreement. And the subdivision agreement is formulated through conditions of draft plan approval. And in order to have that subdivision approved, as I've mentioned, you're generally including an environmental impact study, simply because if you look at the location of our settlement areas, they are anything that's yeah, we have subdivisions up on the eastern section of the township. So right from Sitacrity, there's 3 phases of the Sitacrity subdivision up north, and anything south of that includes Cobble Beach, East Linton, and then all the way down through to Balmy Beach, and then down to Brook. So those settlement areas and the developments in there are all subject to subdivision agreements and development agreements. And the areas around the water, along the shore there, they're all impacted by regulated areas with the Conservation Authority, as well as drainage catchment areas as well. So there's generally plans in place to regulate that development. So especially along the shoreline, because anything along the shoreline is regulated by the Conservation Authority.
Can I
And
just
does that
follow up
answer?
on that?
Sorry.
Just really quickly. So I understand that the official plan really looks at kind of it's more of a principle, a directive that all the other things have to follow from. But I would think that one of the principles that could be included is, we protect our natural environment, but we also act when people are not doing that. And then your bylaws, etc., would set up ways of implementing that process.
Yeah, so it's not typical for a policy document to contain responses to, like, for example, if somebody goes in and cuts down the trees, that's where you would have a procedure to deal with that violation. You don't generally include procedures to address nonconformity within your policy document.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. That I think that's pretty clear. But to Anne's point, Anne, I appreciate you bringing forward, you know, sort of you have the policy piece and then you have the protocol or the procedure piece. And I would suggest that along with enforcement, like bylaw enforcement and violations and fines, there's also in between there a bit of an awareness and education piece too. I think I personally think we could do a better job of getting the word out there about what our expectations are, what's allowed and what's not allowed, and what some of the consequences are for that. So hopefully we'll be moving those kinds of things ahead as time moves along. Any other questions for Jen regarding the official plan revisions? Okay, so it sounds like we have a plan in place, Jen, to provide some feedback to you regarding stakeholders, and we'll give some thought to attendance to the workshop that's coming up in a month's time or so. And is there anything else from your perspective, Jen?
No, but thank you everyone for your time.
Thank you. Excellent. Okay, so moving on to item 6.2. This is the committee's mandate and procedures. I suspect this is time for me to turn it over to our trustee clerk. And I imagine, Brittany, you're going to help clarify what our role is and how the structure of this committee fits into the council structure. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to share my screen, so just bear with me. And just confirming everyone can see that?
Mm-hmm.
Nodding. Okay, perfect. So I come to you today per your request for a review of committee procedures as well as that of your mandate. This presentation will look reminiscent of that which I provided to you earlier this year, I believe in February or March. So I'll start with a brief update of this committee's progress thus far out of that presentation provided to you earlier this year and out of the budgetary process. And then we'll move into our procedural review. That will also look similar to the first presentation I ever provided to the committee in November of 2020 following your commencement. So with that, we'll start with our progress. Again, this committee has been in effect since October of 2020, and you held your first meeting on November 13th of said year, being 2020. To do a quick review of our mandate, the 3 pillars of your mandate are as indicated here, being to develop a climate action plan and recommendations to council out of said plan, including actions for the public and staff, community engagement, public education and outreach, and policy direction and strategic priorities, which will come into effect, especially when we move through this official plan update. Benchmarking with other municipalities and seeking collaboration opportunities, which remain ongoing. As I'm sure you're aware, the Township of Georgian Bless has been seen as a leader in this portfolio. So we remain cognizant of seeking those collaborative opportunities. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot to report on that portfolio right now, but I am continuing to speak with our neighboring municipalities to see how we can make this a regional approach rather than that of just a one township at a time approach. So this is the plan that we originally identified in February, being we were recommending that the climate action portfolio be established as a council priority. That has been defined. Inclusion of funding in the annual budgeting process of $150,000 over the next 3 years. We have started that at $50,000 in 2021 with an additional $50,000 in 2022. Onboarding of a consultant to create the plan, which will be accomplished by our RFP, which has been advertised and since closed. And continuing to explore grants, including those through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, which we continue to do as staff. Again, just to briefly go over the progress out of that plan that we defined. Again, we've been successful in funding the 50,000 both in 2021 with another 50 in 2022. We've joined BARC and PCP, which those we had to pay to join PCP, which came out of that $50,000 that we budgeted in 2021. We've onboarded our climate action coordinator to assist in the planning process, being Trevor. We've advertised the RFP for creation of the climate action work plan and onboarding of a consulting firm that has since closed, and staff are preparing our recommendations for this committee for final approval to council. We've received immense positive feedback from the committee regarding this committee's efforts, so please everyone pat yourselves on the back because we have received a lot of positive feedback. So congratulations to this committee on having such an impactful approach thus far. And finally, we've created an online resource tool for the members of our public, and I have been contacted by other municipalities to assist in sharing the resources as well, being they've found benefit in what we've provided and would like to use the same tools that we've provided to our public as well. So I can give us a big check mark for step one thus far, being we've completed our RFP, we've onboarded our climate action coordinator, and we have been allocated the budgeted funds that we've requested. So big check mark to step one thus far. Again, congratulations to the committee. I know that at times it can seem that bureaucracy is slow, but we are making moves, and I just want to assure the committee that you have an impactful presence here, and everyone congratulates you for the steps that you've taken thus far. So with that, that leads us to step two of the plan that we reviewed again in February. So with the check mark applied to step one, we're now here at step two, in which we're going to start working with the consultant, depending on which consultant the committee moves to move forward with at their next meeting. So I guess just to back up, now that the RFP is closed, staff are preparing a report for this committee that will outline the submissions and the recommended awarded party for the committee's consideration and approval. Following that step, that will go to council for final approval, and then we can start with the consultant and really get this plan moving. So that consultant and the plan will help us move through the BARC and PCP frameworks, and that will form the entirety of step two. I keep getting ahead of myself. I keep chatting. So again, we're working on the report to bring back to you to get that RFP finalized. We can get the plan moving. The planning process will begin with anticipated completion in May 2022, with the final document being approved in November of 2022. Those are our timelines right now. Again, just to remind everyone, these are our BARC milestones, which the consultants will help us move through, as well as that of PCP. And you've seen these before. I know I don't have to go over them. And that will bring us to step three, as I mentioned, with implementation and monitoring of the plan effective November 2022. So that's our part one thus far. Madam Chair, would you like to take questions right now, or I see you shaking your head.
Yeah, thank you, Brittany. I think now is a good time to answer questions and have some dialogue about what we've accomplished and where we're heading. Thank you very much, Brittany, for that summary. I agree. Sometimes it feels like things are moving along so slowly, and we do have to remind ourselves that some things have gotten done. And it is hard to believe we've been meeting for a year now, too. Time does go by quickly. I see your hand is raised, Danuta.
Thank you, Chair Coburn. A couple of things. One very small point where you have talk about a climate action work plan that the consultant will be working on. Do you mean the climate action plan?
Yes, I do. I do mean the climate action plan.
That confused me, and I think there's also a work plan. And somewhere, but not in this presentation, but in one of the things I got prior to the meeting was the indication that the consultant will be working through steps 1, 2, and 3 of both BARC and PCP and have the plan ready by May 2022 for approval. it seemed very fast to me to get through the 3 steps of both those programs, although I would welcome it being quick, but I'm wondering if what we need is timelines for each step to guide.
I would defer, Madam Chair, if I may, in response to that, I would defer to our Director of Operations, being Stephen Dahlmeyer. Stephen, if you can provide any clarity regarding the timelines.
So through you, Madam Chair, to Chair.
We can't really hear you,
Sorry,
Stephen.
Stephen, if you could just, yeah, a little louder would
Try
be
that
helpful.
one.
Perfect.
Can you guys? Okay. Through you, Madam Chair, to the committee. Yeah. So the plan is we're hopefully having a plan finalized, ready to be approved to council for November 2022. But steps 1, 2, and 3 are to be done by May of 2022. We're trying to move forward with this as fast as we can. Even with the election coming forward next year, we're trying to keep this process going. We don't want to lose steam, so we are going to be very aggressive on how we're going to try to achieve these tasks. So the plan is to have milestones 1, 2, and 3 completed by May of next year, 2022, and then a report will be adopted by the new term of council in November of 2022. And then that starts your step 4, and then in step 5, then you have that 1-year review, then updates after that.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Danuta? And are there any other questions regarding the timelines? Go ahead, Danuta.
Only that I still feel that it would be good to work with timelines for each step to help people stay in line and be working together and with where we're going with that.
Steve?
Through you, Madam Chair, this was going to be brought up in my operations update, but when we do the update to the work plan, they'll have timelines a little bit more showing exactly every step of the way of which this committee or the staff and the committee are going to be moving to get through these timelines. So we'll have an actual true account of what the timelines are going to be. So it'll be broken down for every milestone, for every which we need to have for every task. So that'll be in the updated spreadsheet that'll be sent out here next week.
Perfect. Does that address that concern, Danuta? Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Thank you. Any other questions for Brittany or Stephen regarding where we've been and where we're headed? Trevor, any time you feel like chiming in, please feel free to do so. Other questions, other comments? Luke?
Yeah, I had the same question as Danuta did, but I guess it's all, and I think actually Steve answered very well. I'm just wondering, given the amount of, I'm just thinking realistically, the amount of stakeholder consultation that needs to go into these various steps 1, 2, 3. It seems like a very ambitious timeline, and I'm thrilled if we can get to the first 3 steps. And I guess that also as part of the onboarding of the consultant, the selection process of the consultant, they will probably also have a good sense about what actually is realistic to expect. I mean, this is probably not their first rodeo, so they probably can also provide us more with a kind of an accurate assessment about these milestones. Thrilled if we can get it all done by May 2022. That would be fantastic. But there is a process, of course. I guess that's more my point. And again, it goes to the consultant. Drafting a plan is probably the easy piece, but how do you maintain buy-in from the public? How do you maintain that? How do you make sure that it has some legs and that there is broad support? And for that, I think the stakeholder engagement plan will be quite important, and the rollout plan. And but again, I look forward to seeing any kind of schedule also from the consultants to say, well, this is actually, we can do this. So less of a comment, more of a comment, less of a question.
Thank you. Steve, your hand was up. Now it's not. So I imagine that's we're good to go. Danuta, your hand is still up. Back to you, or is that just from before? Okay, thank you. Good. Okay, Brittany, back to you then for part 2.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you for all of the comments through the committee. This is a new process for us as it is for this committee as well. So we as well look forward to the onboarding of the consultant and really get this plan moving for you guys. We understand it has been a slow process thus far, but we're looking to do our best to ensure that we make sufficient process on this regard prior to the election. So with that, we'll move to part 2, being the committee procedures. And again, this will look very reminiscent to the presentation that I gave last year. So just a few highlights to get us going. So I know that this committee has asked some questions regarding clarity regarding their role as an advisory committee. So we will discuss that today. This committee was established to accomplish, again, their mandate, which is the creation of the Climate Action Plan. All meetings, which is very key, and we've identified some areas of flexibility for this, being information sharing throughout the committee structure. But if you're having a meeting that constitutes a quorum of this committee, it must be open and transparent to the public, being it must be live streamed, and there must be a delegate of the township there to keep a formal record of the meeting. And that is required by the Municipal Act. So it is required by law that we uphold those key pillars of accountability and transparency. And as an advisory committee, it is your role to make recommendations to the Township Council for their approval and enactment. How do we do this? We do this through motions. So all decisions of council and committees, well, not so much council. Council can make decisions by bylaws, but all decisions of the committees should be done by a motion. So if you're looking for council support on something, it should be done through a formal motion. Every motion should be moved and seconded and placed on the floor for discussion. That is the appropriate procedure. So the chair, as we've seen, reads the motion aloud, calls for a mover and a seconder, opens discussion, and then calls for a vote on that motion. Motions require the majority support of the committee prior to moving forward. If they do not have majority support, they are lost. Any motion may always be amended once it's placed on the floor. Any member can request a recorded vote, which I will take as the clerk. Votes are taken by show of hands, i.e. those for and those against. And any member may provide a notice of motion for support at a future meeting of the committee. So when you create a motion, what is the next step? So as an advisory committee, it is your role to create recommendations for enactment of council. You are the subject experts in climate action. That's why we have appointed you to this committee. Therefore, within your subject matter realm, it's your responsibility to make recommendations to this council while we move through this climate action planning process. So all of the recommendations that you make as a committee must be enacted by council to be formally recognized as a township initiative. So any action item that comes out of this committee, again, must be forwarded to council for their final approval. And I gave this example previously, but for example, this is what this is an example of a motion that would require enactment of council. So whereas the Township of Georgian Bluffs Climate Action Committee prefers the color pink over the color blue, now therefore the committee hereby recommends that the council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs amend the color of the sky to be pink. So here we're recommending that council enact that the sky is pink rather than blue. And that would then be forwarded to council for formal ratification via the following motion. Whereas the Climate Action Committee endorsed recommendation A, we'll say, recommending that the color of the sky be amended to be pink. Now, therefore, Council of the Township of Georgian Bluffs hereby approves recoloring the sky to be pink. Just an example of what the appropriate procedure would be to have a recommendation of this committee endorsed by that of council. Now, I'll make a special note and say that all of the minutes of this committee, once approved by this committee, are forwarded to council for their information and for enactment. And with that, I wanted to introduce a different conversation, being that of regular meeting dates. Every year, the Clerk's Department creates an annual calendar for council and committees, as well as creates a community calendar where we advertise those dates for the community. And if you'll recall receiving them, they normally come with the flyers. I think we'll be doing something a little bit different and more direct this year. But in the community calendar that you receive on an annual basis, it's indicative of the annual committee and council meetings. This committee has not yet established a regular meeting schedule, and I would recommend at this time that we consider doing so. I have proposed that we meet regularly, at least on a monthly basis, every third Friday at 10 a.m. Now, there is a motion later on in this agenda to approve that, so we can get your regular meeting dates included in those calendars that I just referenced. But I will note that even if you establish a regular meeting once a month, there's nothing stopping this committee from meeting more often than that. As we get into the planning process, I do anticipate the need for more regular meetings rather than once a month, maybe on a bi-weekly basis. But it would be my recommendation at this time that we establish some form of a formal meeting, regular meeting schedule. And I recommend that that would be a once a month event every third Friday at 10 a.m. to match our common practice now. And to review briefly, inclusion of agenda items. If you have an agenda item that is tied to the mandate of this committee, I request that you forward them to our deputy clerk, being Carly, at least 1 week in advance of the meeting. As clerks, we're kind of always in 1 week, a week before everyone else, a week before the week that we're in, because we're planning our meeting agendas accordingly. So it's helpful to have your agenda items fairly early in advance so we know what needs to be included, how much is going to be included, so we can ensure that we're not tying you to a meeting that's 4 or 5 hours. So again, if you have an agenda item, please aim to forward them to Carly 1 week in advance of the meeting to facilitate agenda publishing. And with that, we'll briefly cover our conclusion. All actions should be tied to your mandate, being creation of the plan, and providing that policy direction to council. So for example, the tree related discussions we're having, those tie directly to policies at the township level, being the official plan, creation of bylaws, etc. The committee has accomplished step 1 of 3, again, a big check mark, congratulations. And we are preparing to present the completed RFP and the recommended awarding party at your next meeting. We will commit to ensure that we have that report and that information to you at your next meeting to get this process moving along. And with that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions of the committee.
Excellent, thank you. Just one discrepancy that I noted with your presentation compared to the new business recommendation for the regular meeting schedule does note Thursdays, and we can talk about that when we get to new business.
Yeah, that's simply an error. I will be asking that it be amended to say Friday. Unless this committee decides Thursday is a better day, which is fine.
Okay, questions, comments for Brittany regarding the second part of that presentation that has to do with our committee mandate and procedures? I think it's, I appreciate it, Brittany. I think it's helpful for us to be reminded about how we bring business forward in the form of motions. It's not something that we're all necessarily familiar with, and I think as well as formalizing recommendations, it also puts it in a format that's suitable and appropriate for council then to consider in a substantive way, rather than just notes or minutes for people to consider. So thank you for reminding us of that. Luke, over to you.
Yeah, and it's actually it's repeating what you said, Chair. It's thanks for explaining the fact that there are no questions or few questions from our side. Probably means that it was really good, and it's always helpful to also to see it part of the background pack, so we can read it over again in a few weeks' time, and what's the motion of committee again. So very well done, and thanks very much. That's all.
My pleasure. And as members of the Clerk's Department, Carly and I are always here to assist you with that formality piece, being creation of motions, etc. So always here to help if we can.
Thank you.
Can
I
make a
wonder
comment?
how the committee and staff might feel about the possibility of a press release. It's been a year since we started. I know it's felt at times as though we're really bogged down in the mud, but when we see Brittany's presentation, it is, you know, I think there's a lot to be proud of. And I think the fact that we're hearing that the feedback is also very positive. Is this a good time at 1 year in to send out a press release to highlight what we've accomplished and what the next steps are? Would that be appropriate?
Can I make a comment?
Yes, go ahead,
So,
Anne.
Yeah.
you.
So first of all, I want to thank Brittany because I thought she did a really excellent job. It's a very clear presentation that you did, and I also appreciate your comment about the monthly scheduled meeting, but the option to actually have some other meetings if things are busy and we need them. So I think that's a really good plan. So thank you, Brittany, for that. I wonder, because I see reference in the agenda as well as Brittany's document about onboarding a consultant. I wonder whether that would be a really good time to do a press release because it feels like that's kind of the next kind of move forward and something to celebrate.
I'm sorry, Anne, I didn't just catch the last part of that. Did you say that would be the best time to move forward with the press release? Okay.
I wonder about that because it feels like we've been a little bit in limbo for a while, but taking onboarding the consultant is the next step to actually moving the plan forward from what I understand from Brittany's process. So that might be a really good time to say, you know, we're moving forward, things are progressing, here's what we've done.
Yeah, I'm seeing nodding heads. I think you're right. Maybe sending one out before that process has moved along would be, we'd be missing an opportunity maybe to make that announcement. Okay, so that sounds good for folks if we wait for that onboarding and announcement and then we do a press release then. Okay, perfect. Luke, again, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if that's a new hand raised or a former hand raised.
Yeah, it's a new one. It's a new one. And it's just a matter of clarification. So on the slide on the council actions, all action items require endorsement by council, especially with those with a financial impact, are mostly accomplished, appropriately accomplished through a motion of committee. My question would be procedurally, if we want to keep the council informed about progress that's been made and to kind of keep this climate agenda on this climate action issue on the agenda. It's easy for the council to say, well, we have a subcommittee and they will take care of it. Whereas we know from time to time, we really want to have a council that has ownership and buy-in and is aware of what we're doing. What is the appropriate procedure if we decided it would be important, let's say on a quarterly basis, to inform the council for 5, 10, 15, whatever minutes? What is the appropriate procedure to do that? Does that go through a motion of committee, or is there a different, or is it simply for us as a committee to decide that that's important, and then we request to be put on the agenda?
Yeah, I'll let Brittany answer that, but I think there's a number of ways that can be done, and I love where you're going with this. I wonder if there can be, as you say, quarterly updates in the form of a delegation even of this committee. We all know that our minutes are circulated in the committee agendas that are sometimes 300 pages long. So they do get buried and they do get forgotten about sometimes and not read. So Brittany, how would you feel about this committee giving an update for council?
I love that idea. I think it's great. I think now that, especially now that we're onboarding the consultant and we're really pushing the plan forward, I think that would be a great opportunity for this committee to present via a delegation on a quarterly basis. If we find that helpful, I think that would be an excellent idea. So we'll reflect that in the minutes, and then we can determine when we're ready to do so. I think it might be beneficial for you even to go in front of council by the end of this year and say, this is what we've accomplished. This is what we've been doing for the past year. And that sets you up well for the budgetary discussions as well, because you've proven we've taken this money, we've done this, and we need more in 2022 to keep this going. So I think that's an excellent idea, Luke, and I'm happy to facilitate that for this committee.
Perfect. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, sounding good. All right, moving on to item number 7 on the agenda, which is correspondence. I had asked that the FCM article, or guide rather, for municipal climate change professionals be shared with this committee. I believe that one is more targeted towards municipal staff, if I'm not mistaken, and hopefully that can be circulated or shared somehow amongst staff, Brittany, if anyone's interested. The second one is the Grey Bruce Climate Action Network's annual report. And I forget who brought that one forward, but I don't know if there's any comments or discussion to be had on those 2 items of correspondence. Deputy Mayor Carlton.
Thank you. Just a question on the first one, the FCM Connect. I couldn't get at the links in that document. So for whatever reason, they don't click through. So is there a different way to share that one with us so that we can actually access the links? Thank you.
Sorry, I thought I did circulate that by email, but it's been so long now I have forgotten. So maybe Brittany, you can remind me.
I can't right off the top of my head. I know we received it by email. I don't recall who was included, but either way, I will circulate it to this committee so they have it and ensure that it goes out to staff.
Perfect, thank you. And Danuta?
Yeah, I echo what Sue says, because I wanted to know what the 6 financial tools were. So that, yes. And we didn't get a copy of the NR, the GB CAN annual report to you, I guess, to include, or whether that was something people wanted to look at. But we can certainly send it to Brittany if that's something that people want to access. It's just the first year, and of course the annual report's been a bit of a while in the concluding, and all the work that went into putting pictures with it and everything else. But it is the first annual report of the network, which is a group of all the climate action active committee groups in Grey County, including Collingwood, which is sort of in Simcoe County, and one in Bruce County, which is Northern Bruce Peninsula. So it's a network, and it is actually really beginning to find its drivers. And so I think that it's worthy and good for people to know that this exists and is ongoing.
Thank you, Danuta. Is it appropriate to include that link for this meeting before we approve the minutes, or would that come on to the next, be forwarded on to the next agenda? Brittany, what's best there for that annual report?
I would suggest that the link form part of the minutes, so we have it as a formal record. And I would also suggest that it could be beneficial to include it as a community resource on our website, just to really tie in the connection between that group and this committee as well.
Does that make sense, Danuta?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. And Anne?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to put it into the website link. I did direct a copy of that to Carly, but it may have been too late to be included in the minutes. I don't know. So if she needs another copy of it, I can get it to her.
Okay, Carly's with us. Do you want to confirm that you have that link, Carly?
I'm just searching my inbox for it. Regardless, if I don't have it, I'll send an email to Anne and we'll get it included in the minutes, and it will also be circulated via email to the committee.
Thank you very much. Perfect. Okay, if there's nothing more there, we can move on to the staff reports and beginning with an operational update. So I guess Stephen and Brittany and maybe Trevor.
Through you, Madam Chair, to the committee, just to kind of bring everybody up to speed here. We're currently still working on the work plan, just so everybody's aware. We should have a copy out to everybody by next Friday. We did receive an email from one of the committee members here with some of our questions that we kind of are looking into a bit more to be more added into the work plan so that you guys can have a full detail of what's going on. Some of the other notes that was mentioned in this meeting and the previous meeting, we'll be incorporating those into this work plan. So we should have something to you by next Friday, and then we can kind of get back on track with our next meeting coming up here to kind of go through with the steps, along with bring a staff report forward to you guys for your review for the selection of the consultant as well for the RFP.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Any questions regarding those updates that will be forthcoming for the next meeting? Luke?
Steve, question about the work plan. Is that a work plan for the department, or is it a work plan that helps us unpack what is needed to get the climate action plan in place?
Through you, Chair Coburn, to Luke, or committee member Luke, it's basically our work plan from a department point of view, kind of coming back to you, but it also establishes what is needed to get to the next steps of the milestones, and it'll also incorporate the consultant's work plan as well to kind of keep us going. So you guys will see both kind of in one document instead of having multiple documents kicking around.
Does that answer your question, Luke? So it sounds like it's the staff work plan incorporating the milestones and the steps that we're looking towards. And separate from that, of course, is our committee work plan, which we still sort of have on the back burner or behind the scenes as well. It gets a bit confusing, doesn't it, with all of these work plans and knowing how to amalgamate them all, make sense of them all. Other questions or comments, Luke?
Well, the only thing that I would say is that it would be useful to, and maybe we need to have a separate meeting on that, but I think it would be useful, you know, what can we do? I think that as a committee, we are moving forward, but at the same time, we're also we're a little bit idle at the moment because we do not have, at least I don't have a good sense about what the next steps are and where we can add value. And therefore, it puts a little bit, to me, it puts the question on the table, like, what is then the role of the committee in terms of providing you support and helping you move that process, helping you in getting that process along. So the more, whether it's an operational work plan or a committee work plan or a climate action work plan, but it's still not clear personally to me, how do we get to that work plan in May 2022 and then have it operationalized as from October, November 20, end of the year after the elections. So it's more that I'm struggling to see, okay, what is our role? And if we don't have the information, we can't provide support. I think, just to be blunt. And I think that's the more we are involved in that process, and not to impose anything, but to provide guidance or being a sparring partner, hopefully we can then help that plan get along. But I think it's now the last work plan that we discussed was the work plan of this committee. That probably was in June, July. and we used to have kind of a work plan that we basically said, okay, we have a strategy, we have a plan, and we're going to check every month how far we have actually progressed against the plan. And we don't have that at the moment. And I think that's, in whatever name it has, in whatever capacity, if it's all amalgamated or separate, that's more about the form. But I do still think it would be nice to have some kind of an idea about this is the way forward. And I have a lot of trust in the consultants, but you know, there's a lot of hope involved, and hope, as we know, is not a real strategy. So that's so it's basically the same feedback as last time, is to request to, you know, use the committee. That's basically, I think, my point. Use the committee in. We all want the same thing. We put our time into it. You put your time into it. Let's see how we can make these make these meetings as useful as possible, and be able to demonstrate as well that we're actually moving along. And the question is a little bit, and then I will stop. But the question, I get questions from people, from my neighbors, who say, "What's the plan? How are we going?" Because you put yourself out there. Georgian Bluffs put itself out there as a leader, and I am struggling to say, well, we were there 3 months ago, and we are here now, and in 3 months we will be to the next milestones. So so that's kind of the background of the request to have that plan.
Yeah, no, I think those are fair questions and fair points. And also, how does Trevor's role factor into all of this as well? Like especially when we onboard the consultant. So I you know, even though even today we have several action items coming out of this this meeting, and I know we're a committee of doers, but we're also an advisory body to council. So I see a big part of our role is making recommendations to council to ensure that council is making decisions that move us continually towards implementation of a climate action plan. I don't know if staff have anything more to add there, but I imagine we'll be looking at the committee work plan again in a little more focus once we onboard and get working with the consultant, because then we're going to see how our role will fit with the role of the consultants. Staff, any comments for Luke about how we feel like we're being used to the best of our ability as a committee? Brittany?
I just want to again highlight that we understand this has been a slow process thus far. We do. I can understand that at times it feels as though, again, bureaucracy is slow moving, and there's different variations of red tape that we have to move through to get things accomplished. But I can assure you that once we have the report presented to this committee with the RFP awarding, we will be off to the races. And I mean that with full confidence. And my cat is about to join this meeting. I apologize. But I sincerely mean that. And I'm prepared to back it. We are moving forward faster than we have been. And I promise, once we get the RFP awarded, we'll be off to the races.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, go ahead, Anne.
Right. So thank you for that, Brittany. That does sound hopeful. What Luke mentioned in his comments, that maybe we need a meeting focused on the amalgamating of the various work plans and having everybody kind of on the same page in terms of the steps forward. And I wonder whether Trevor talks about having his internal work plan kind of step by step done by next Friday. There is the RFP, you're going through the responses to that. I wonder, once we have the consultant on board, Trevor's work plan ready to look at, whether then we need a meeting that really focuses on, in detail, how are we moving this forward. Because I think that's been part of the frustration of the committee members, is that there's been a lack of clarity, And when there's a lack of clarity, it's really difficult to figure out where we fit, how we can be most helpful.
Brittany.
Thank you for the comments, Vice Chair. We can definitely arrange to have that meeting. I would suggest that we do so when the consultant comes on board, because I do envision that once we have that guidance, there will be that amalgamation of the work plans and an appropriate outline of what's going to happen and at what speed. Being, when are we going to achieve milestones 1, 2, and 3, and how do we accomplish achieving said milestones? It would be my opinion that to achieve those milestones, we have to marry all of the existing work plans to be successful in that regard, especially with the aggressive timelines that we've outlined today, being completion by May of 2022.
And so so you're recommending, Brittany, that we take a look at this in terms of timelines. Remind me again when we're likely to onboard the consultant.
So at your next meeting, we will have a report recommending which party to be awarded for the completion of the plan for the consultant. So if I can ask you, and I know I've asked this committee this before, but please just bear with me until your next meeting. We'll have that report, we can get this moving, and then we'll have a defined path moving forward.
So it'll come back to this committee next month, and then following that, our recommendation, based on staff's recommendation, will then go forward to council for approval. And do we see onboarding January?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So does it work to put the work plans a little bit on hold until we do that onboarding? Anne, what are your thoughts?
Well, one of the thoughts is Brittany was talking about, I mean, I think in principle that sounds really fine. But when I heard the onboard, like it has to go to council for approval. So once we, as a committee, kind of say, yep, those are the guys to do the job, or the women to do the job, it then has to go to council for approval. And so then you're looking at, like, if we're approving it in the third Friday of December, it then has to go to council. The chances of council approving it before sometime in January, I don't think that's going to happen. So council will be approving it in January. We've got a timeline for May 2022. I don't know how that's going to work.
Yeah, it's a fair point, and what you don't see are Steve and Stevens and Brittany's hands waving and their heads shaking. So I think they're likely going to tell you that it's going to get back to council sooner than that. But I'll turn it over to Stephen or Brittany.
I'm going to pass it over to the Madam Chair, unless you want me to answer the timeline.
I'm going to ask that.
I'm sorry, the clerk, Madam Clerk.
Yeah. Don't put me on the spot like that, Stephen.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Brittany.
If I may, Madam Chair, through you, it's absolutely our intention to have this in front of council prior to January. Absolutely. So we have two council meetings in December, being I believe the 1st and the 15th. So ideally, if we can get that report finalized into this committee before the end of November, then there should be no reason why it's delayed any further than the first meeting in December. And that would be my recommendation, that when we're establishing our next meeting date, that we make it prior to the end of November, so we can have that report in front of council at that first meeting.
Perfect, thank you. Sound good, Anne?
That sounds much better. So it sounds like we will be meeting prior to the third Thursday in December to do this. Yes,
I think that regular third Thursday or third Friday, I'm going to hope for Thursday, not Friday, is going to be the established schedule for the 2022 calendar year. So we can look at dates for this committee for the remainder of the year outside of that commitment.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Okay, perfect. Moving on to public question period. I'm looking to our clerk. There have not been any questions submitted. I'm going to be really excited when somebody actually does submit a question. No unfinished business to note, and new business. I know possibly all three of these, at least the first two, have come from Mr. Anderson. So I will turn the floor over, if I may, to Member Anderson to address the items under new business.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll try and keep this really short. This stems from the importance of tree document that I created and was submitted to council recently, that sometime this fall. And the idea that in development and cutting down trees, what is the replacement of that? And this is emerging from the importance of realizing in sustainable development, our ecosystem services are very important. So there's a whole cadre of reasons that we want to keep our wetlands, we want to keep our trees. And more recently, what is emerging is the importance of carbon sequestration. And this is something that Linda Swanson and I were discussing yesterday in the context of their climate change action plan. Sequestration is mentioned throughout the draft plan. I think it's at least 11 times, yet there's absolutely nothing in that plan that indicates the degree to which the county can actually do that and measure of that. And then as the agenda here includes down below are some links to recent initiatives that are coming out of the federal government in terms of the importance of sequestration and the opportunities that are going to be there. And the way these documents read is that we're going to be paid to sequester carbon. So as we go to net zero, there's two action plans. And one is we want to reduce our current emissions, but the other is we want to draw down those emissions. And these federal plans are being targeted at agriculture. There's going to be agricultural opportunities for this. And they're also being targeted at municipalities. And so this is sort of bringing to the agenda that as we go forward and we develop in these plans, this is sort of a new metric that I think that we really want to pay attention to. And Linda, they're very actively working with ICLEI Canada, Caitlin Roger in particular, and I've been working with Caitlin. There are methods to calculate sequestration, and that's where my questions come from in terms of our land classification. Very briefly, the county can't do that right now. They don't like to admit it, but they have no way of knowing actually how many trees we have and how many wetlands we have in terms of the existing classification system. So this is forward-looking, but it's going back to my importance of tree document that was submitted to council and making sure as we go forward that this is on our radar, because I believe with the new federal programs, there's going to be great opportunities here. And I hope that we're early adopters of that. So that's all I have to say as an intro, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any comments or questions, Bob?
You're muted, Bob.
I'm sorry, I wasn't unmuted there. Yeah, I just received an email this morning from a prof at the University of Vermont. He gave a presentation a few weeks ago about sequestration of carbon in sugar bushes. And so I just asked him for some more information. So I'll be sending that out to you, but it depends on what species you have. I guess I was thinking about BTUs and wood, but the heavier your wood is, the more heat you get out of it. So the denser the wood is, the more carbon it packs away. So he sent a table indicating which species are, what their levels would be related to that, and also another paper on different types of woodlots and what, how much carbon would be sequestered per hectare. So there's some good information there. So that it's kind of exciting to have that. So I'll send that out soon.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. Thank you, Bob. Other questions, Luke?
Yeah, thanks for forwarding me, John. I was very excited to see this being part of the background check. I think it's a paradigm shift. It is really seeing it as, to me, it was a bit of as a game changer. And I just wondered for the committee, how do we make sure that we keep this on the radar and that it is kind of like John said, if we want to be an early adopter, how do we make sure that we actually don't let it fall in between the cracks? Because woodlands and other opportunities, it seems that Georgian Bluffs is particularly well positioned to actually benefit from these kind of programs, and it seems to check a lot of boxes. So I wonder, and that may be something to discuss in future meetings, but I just want to make sure that we don't let it slide and see if we can really explore to what extent this will be applicable to our area.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, over to you, Anne.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think this is a really important, these are really important issues that I agree with Luke and John, that we need to keep it on the radar. And earlier in the meeting, we had talked about doing possibly quarterly presentations to council. And I think this kind of information would be really important to share with them. If there's funding coming down the tubes for farmers or municipalities around carbon sequestration, I think it's important for them to hear this, because it would be a way they could take action that at the moment doesn't actually cost them money, but can still be really, really positive action.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So when we get thinking about addressing council, then now we're kind of looking at two sort of different approaches. One is to update them on what we've accomplished as a committee and where we're moving forward. But also there's this other part of a delegation, and that's to inform and increase awareness about things like forest programs and carbon offset programs. So yeah, I wonder if they need to be done at different times so as not to overwhelm, or I'm sure our clerk will have some advice to offer there. But John, I do see your hand up, so we'll go to you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's then appropriate to add at this time that we could consider an actionable item, which is to have a specific tree cutting bylaw. Now, I was in touch with Brittany about this through the chair, through you, Madam Chair. I have a summary written, but very briefly, we don't have a specific bylaw. Owen Sound and Meaford do have specific bylaws, and the town of Blue Mountains is right now drafting a specific bylaw. So this might be an actionable item that we could begin to work forward on that would directly address the importance of trees, if you like, in Georgian Bluffs.
I agree, and I love how you've tied this discussion back to Brittany's recommendation before, in that we need to take advantage of the committee's ability to draft motions to be presented at council. It's something I believe, and Brittany may disagree with me, but I believe that's something we could do now. This committee can make a motion that council direct staff to create a tree cutting bylaw to be enacted within our municipality. It could be just as simple as that, or asking council to direct staff to provide a report on the possibility of creating such a bylaw. Though I tend to go more towards just create the bylaw as opposed to direct staff to bring back a report. So that's just me wanting to get things done quickly. So your comments, Brittany, what do you recommend in this situation?
Thank you, Councillor Coburn. Or thank you, Madam Chair. We're not in a council meeting. We have the option to present that motion here today. It would be my recommendation as the clerk of this township that we take this motion as a notice of motion here today for enactment at your next meeting. So we can add the I don't want to call it fluff, but essentially it's fluff to appropriately get our case across, being, you know, whereas regulation so-and-so says this, and whereas the township has taken a stance and, you know, declared climate action as a priority, now therefore, da 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 da, etc. So that would be my recommendation, that we take the time to appropriately craft a formal recommendation to ensure that this committee is appropriately communicating the weight of this decision and the necessity of this decision. That would be my recommendation.
Can I make a
And
comment?
always on point, Brittany. Thank you. Item number 12 is notice of motion. I would recommend that we provide that notice of motion at that time. And then the steps to follow, perhaps the clerk can advise us if that's something staff will craft, or if that's something the committee will do, or how that works. So I would recommend we leave that for notice of motion under number 12.
Can I make a
Is that
comment,
okay with
Kathy?
folks? Yes, go ahead, Anne.
Yeah, I agree with Brittany, whether you call it fluff or whatever you call it. If you don't have your garden ready for the seeds, and I think it's the same as sending a motion to council, that the last thing this committee wants to do is to have its first motion to council not have enough backup in preparation that the council turn it down. So I think the work that goes into getting this motion ready and the education around the backup, the background for it is really, really important, because we want our first motion to pass.
Yeah, agreed. The nice thing about other municipalities paving the way, though, is that often the wording is already there and we just have to massage it a bit to fit our circumstances. So I don't see it as something that we need to make laborious or onerous. The information will be out there. We can provide that in the form of notice of motion and then return to it at our next meeting. So thanks, Anne, I appreciate that.
Kathy, can I ask that when staff request for copies of those motions that have passed in other municipalities, that they also ask for the background work that was done with council around getting the motion to the table and getting it passed?
Sure. Does that sound reasonable without causing any undue work for staff? Brittany, that's doable?
Yes, absolutely. And all of this forms public agendas as well. So whatever recommendations are presented are traditionally accompanied by a report. So we can definitely pull that information for this committee.
Yeah. Perfect.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. John, where are we with our list of new business then? I do want to get to the, there is a motion. Have we dealt with 11.3 or sorry, 11.2?
Well, I think so, in that is in there, and also recognize that there will be new things coming. I mean, Canada was one of the signatories this year to stop deforestation by the year 2030. So these are primarily will be federally driven programs at this point, is the way I understand it. But I think that is why that's covered. That is that there are existing programs for planting trees, and there are clearly new policies coming down the line that are going to give us credit for this carbon we sequester. That's where this is coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a good time to consider them as they're timely in the news, but I imagine they'll also be captured by our consultant in the development of our climate action plan as well, given the nature of our communities here in Georgian Bluffs. If we move on to 11.3, this is a motion that was passed at the municipality of Grey Highlands, endorsing gas-powered phase-out of. I'm just opening up the motion now, which is attached to the agenda under 11.3. good information for us to have. That was brought to Grey Highlands on September 15th, and that passed. Is this something that someone would like to speak to? And is this something that this committee would also like to discuss under notice of motion for our own council to encourage adopting?
Kathy, I can speak to it.
Thank you, Anne.
I actually asked to have it put on the agenda, and I don't know whether people know that there's over 30 municipalities in the province now that have done similar motions and directed it to the province of Ontario. And my wondering is this a motion that we would like to move forward and have George and Bless also join those other municipalities in supporting the decrease of electricity generation through gas-powered plants. So there's lots of material here, but the question is, do we want to move a motion forward to council to this effect? And I think the last count I saw was at least 32 municipalities have signed similar motions.
Yeah, that's really helpful information, and I do find it effective to demonstrate to council what some of our neighbors are also doing. It helps folks to think about making more of a collective effort in that regard. So that can also be worked into a resolution, I believe. Are there, I'm just going to ask for some discussion around this particular item. Danuta, I see your hand is up.
Just to endorse what Anne is saying, and in addition, we have access to a PowerPoint presentation which was produced by the Ontario Clean Air Alliance for presentation to municipalities. So if people needed more information or they wanted a presentation, that probably something we could deliver.
Brittany.
Thank you. So this committee essentially has two options. I'll lay them out and then I'll provide my recommendation. So your first option is to simply refer this item to council for their information. Your second option, I guess I should say, is to again add the fluff through a notice of motion. And again, that would be my recommendation. So we can provide the background and provide them with the story as to how we got here, and include in the attachment, being the motion, this formal motion that we're going to present, include the background information, Danuta, that you've just referenced, being the presentation, and draw some of our background information from that specifically. So those are your two options. Option B is my recommendation, and should we decide to move forward, we can provide that under notice of motion later on in the agenda.
Thank you, Brittany. How are folks feeling about those options? Sue's nodding, John smiling. Yeah, Luke. Okay, I think that's not a big surprise, Brittany, that we would, as a committee, likely opt for option number 2, and recognizing that when we take these notices of motion forward, it does create extra work for staff. So thank you. We very much appreciate that. But these are other specific actionable items that that we can add to our successes, hopefully this year as we take them forward to council. Brittany?
I just wanted to note that I will likely be in touch with the subject matter experts while crafting these motions, just to ensure that we're covering our bases appropriately. So John, if I may connect with you regarding your first notice of motion, and Anne, I will do the same with this particular item.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, if there's no more discussion on that item, we will move forward to discussing the 2022 regular committee meeting schedule. This one states Thursday. I was excited about that because when we do get to going away over weekends, we often extend it by a day, and I'm being very selfish, but I would personally prefer Thursdays over Fridays. And having said that, it's a committee decision, and I have tablet and will travel. So what are your thoughts on I guess, a regular meeting schedule for 2022, and what day of the week would be preferable, Thursdays or Friday mornings? Any comments? Deputy Mayor?
I'm okay with it being on Thursday as long as it stays with the third Thursday, because second and fourth I've got county council, so I'd have that conflict there. But I'm okay with Thursday if everyone else is.
Does anyone have any opposition to the third Thursday at 10 o'clock in the morning? Anne?
No.
Okay. All right, so the recommendation then, if I may, Madam Clerk, is that the Climate Action Committee adopt a regular meeting schedule with meetings occurring on the third Thursday of each month at 10 a.m. subject to change, where the regular meeting falls on a holiday or office closure, and that the committee approves the proposed 2020 meeting schedule as presented. Is there someone who would move that recommendation? Thank you, Sue. And all those in favor?
Yes.
Opposed? Okay, that passes. Thank you very much. It'll be nice to know, and probably even more so for staff, when these meetings are going to fall on a regular basis. Carly, over to you.
If I may, the meeting schedule that's included does reflect Friday. So I will update that schedule and provide it to the committee to reflect Thursday.
Thank you very much. That's great. Perfect. Okay, so that takes us to notice of motion number 12. I knew there was a reason why I wanted this as a standing item on agendas, Brittany. Finally. So we have two notices of motion that have been brought forward. One is in regards to a tree cutting bylaw. The other is joining Grey Highlands in a similar kind of resolution, a recommendation for council regarding a gas phase out for power generation for the province. Do we have enough information there for staff to move forward with that, Brittany? Okay. And do we need to vote on approving those as notices of motion? No. Okay. Procedurally, we're okay then. Carly, your hand is up. I'm not sure if that's an old, oh, there we go. That's from before. Okay. So moving ahead then, we have no items to discuss in closed session. And finally, the date of our next regular meeting, listed here as December 3rd at 10 a.m. And does that work for folks?
If I may, Madam Chair, and not to speak out of turn, I would recommend that we move that up simply to accommodate that first meeting in December. So I would suggest something as quickly as the 19th or the 25th to ensure that we can meet the agenda publication for that first meeting in December.
Okay.
Ideally the 19th if we can make it work.
The 19th does work for me. And you said the other option was the 26th?
The 25th, because the agenda will be published for that first meeting in December on the 26th.
Okay. Does the 19th of November work for everyone else? Is there anyone who is not able to make it that day? Danuta cannot make it that day. Sorry, Anne?
Okay, I was going to say, as long as it's earlier in the day, I could make it.
I think I see Luke and Danuta both indicating that that date does not work for them. And I know the morning isn't great for me that day either. It would have to be mid to late afternoon. So that's not working for you either, Luke?
No, it's not, but I can, no, but this is important, so let me not be an obstacle.
Danuta, is there any time that day that doesn't work for you, or is the whole day out?
Just the morning.
Would, and I'm looking to staff because I know that your schedules are busy with meetings already. Is there any time that afternoon that would work after 1? Stephen?
Through you, Madam Chair, the committee, anything after 1 p.m. would be beneficial to myself and Trevor.
Okay, so 1:30 or 2, Brittany?
Sure. Yep.
So can I have a show of hands? Who is able to make the next meeting November 19th at 1:30 p.m.?
Could I ask to have it a little bit later in the afternoon, and then I could make it?
Okay, what time are you thinking, Anne?
2:30?
2:30, does that work for staff?
If I may, and I don't want to confuse this process because I know there's a lot of schedules going on, but if the 19th doesn't work, there's nothing preventing us from choosing an alternative day during that week or the week following, if there's a day that would work better for this committee.
So just to speak up, for me during that week, actually the Friday afternoon is the only possible day I could do it during that week.
Okay, how
The following week is better.
The following week is better, but prior to that wasn't going to be soon enough, Brittany, in order for it to coincide with the council meeting.
So if we do the Monday or the Tuesday of the week following, then we would still have enough time to make the agenda publication. Traditionally, we would ask for more time, but given, you know, the short notice of all of this, if we have the Monday or the Tuesday, we can make it work.
It would be great if all of the committee could be there, so I don't want to belabor this, but if we look at Monday, November the 22nd, will that include everyone then?
Yes.
In the morning.
So the morning of Monday, November 22nd.
I'm flying. I'm sorry.
Ah, okay.
But if it's later in the afternoon on Friday, I'll be in Serbia, so it will be 6 hours later. So I can do Friday night. That would probably work on the Friday afternoon. I can make that work.
So then that would be the 19th later in the afternoon. So, but the problem is I don't want it to, I'm not going to ask staff to stay past 4:30 on Friday.
No, but if it's 2:30 or whenever works for Anne, that's 9:30, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock my time, that will work.
That's the Friday. Okay, so it sounds like the Friday works for everybody then at 2:30.
I could do 2 as well, if that helps. 2 o'clock.
Is that better or worse for you, Luke? 2 o'clock as compared to 2:30?
Doesn't matter.
I feel like an auctioneer. Okay, do I hear 2 o'clock? 2 o'clock Friday, November 19th. Yay! Okay, so the next meeting will be held Friday, November 19th at 2 p.m. Thank you for staff for your flexibility around that. And with that, I would just ask for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Danuta, and all in favor?
Yes.
Fantastic. Great to see everyone, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you.
I will see you.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Enjoy your day.
Thank you. Have a good weekend, everyone.